Welcome to Season 3 of Tales from the Trenches Tuesdays. Today, it is my absolute honor to have Alan Harrison on with us.
Here's a story of a fundraiser who was launching his very own web show. Each episode is very short due to edits, so it can really flow. Here's a story of a podcast guest star who was busy raising money of their own. They were each great in their own way, fundraising in its own. Till the one day when Jack asked a guest to join him, and they knew it was much more than a jest, that these guests must somehow form a resource. That's the way they all became the podcast guests. The podcast guests, the podcast guests. That's the way they became the podcast guests.
Allison is a writer, father, performer, consultant, recovering artist, and the author of the soon-to-be bestseller Scene Change. For 30 years, he's led, produced, directed, promoted, raised money for, starred, and failed in over 300 theatrical productions and Off-Broadway and at prestigious and not so prestigious nonprofit arts organizations across the country. He's also a two-time Jeopardy champion, so you know there's that. The arts invoke passion, mostly from artists, but nonprofit arts are only successful when they result in measurably positive change among those that need it most. When a nonprofit's donors are also its recipients, then its mission devolves into meaningless puffery, flapdoodle, and codswallop. So, Alan, thank you so very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. I should let you know that you did what a lot of people do, which is combine my first and last name into one name when you started it, and you called me Allison. So I thank you for that, for noticing that both names exist. It is Alan, and you're not the first person to do that. People do that all the time.
Maybe I was just talking fast.
There you go.
It's funny. My wife and I religiously watch Jeopardy. It's one of the few things we actually watch together where we don't have to fight about the quality of the programming. When were you actually on the show?
2018. So
okay, so we were definitely watching
6 years ago, and it was almost 7 years ago, and it was quite the experience. Everybody else was in their 20s and 30s, and here I was in my 50s going to do that.
Well, there's nothing wrong with us, those of us in our 50s, right?
Clearly, because I won twice, so that's good.
There you go. There you go. So let's start this off actually with one of the questions that I didn't provide for you, which is so many fundraising professionals kind of fall into the profession. It's not what they started off intending to do. So talk to me a little bit about your journey as how you became a professional.
Well, you're right. I made the gamut. In fact, I wrote a lot about it in the book, Scene Change. So I started as a performer way back when, and moved to New York and was doing the New York thing, acting, actually making a living as an actor, which was, rare, and also doing a lot of other things to supplement the money, because acting, while I made a living doing it, it wasn't much of a living, and so I had to supplement. And I got involved with doing things like, handing out flyers at the TKTS line in Times Square. At the time, it was a trailer, and not a nice trailer.
Right.
And I came across a whole bunch of people who were mostly performers, and it was a community idea. We would cover for each other when somebody had an audition, or if somebody got a role, then somebody else would take over their job, and it was seamless, and it was very much of a I don't want to call it a boho existence, but it was kind of like that. We all covered for each other. Some wonderful people I met during that time. And from there, I started realizing that I did an off-Broadway show that lasted for 9 months. At the end of that 9 months, I had $250 in my bank account. I said, you know what? There's more to life than this. And as I was getting closer and closer to 30, I realized I can't do this anymore. So I talked to a friend who had a friend who said, they're starting up this new company up at Lincoln Center. Are you interested? And at the time I was producing 2 off-Broadway shows and got a lot of input and a lot of information from that. I noticed that the one of them got great reviews and lasted for 6 weeks. The other got terrible reviews and lasted for months. So I don't know. I took the job at Lincoln Center Theater early in their new time in the 80s. And from there, I got into marketing, and I already had some audience research on the fly by handing out flyers at TKTS. I knew what people wanted and what people didn't want, and who to talk to about certain plays and how to get that to work. We changed over from a subscription. We sent over 20,000 people a letter that said, you are no longer a subscriber to Lincoln Center Theater. You're now a member. And we changed the whole program, which works in New York. I'm not sure how well it works everywhere else. And the idea is that, for $25 a year at the time, $25 a year, you could buy 1 ticket per membership for $10. And then you could buy them ahead of time. You could buy them day of, you could whatever, but for you, it's $10. And from there, I started moving around the country, taking positions in marketing, and then ultimately in running companies. So I moved from New York back to, down to San Diego, up to Pittsburgh. Oh, there was a time at the Pasadena Playhouse, so up into LA, and then Pittsburgh, and then Seattle. And then at Seattle Rep, and then I ran a small company in Monterey County, California, and then moved all the way across country to where I had never lived before in the Deep South, and was the managing director of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival for 3 years. Sort of an attempt to be the Ashland of the South or Stratford of the South. It was neither, because nobody goes to Alabama in the summer because it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, and let's face it, it's Alabama.
Right.
So then we, when that was done, moved back to Seattle, and I've pretty much been here ever since. I did spend a year in Detroit, but then I came back to Seattle and raised my family and my son and all that stuff. So all is well with Alan up in Seattle. Now, that's how I got into the business of nonprofit arts organization. How I got into the fundraising aspect was that when you are the executive director or the managing director, and here in Seattle, I was the executive director for Arts West for many, many years. You are not only the chief marketer and the chief operations person, you're also the chief development officer. And as the boss, I followed my own advice, learned from years and years and years of working, which was that the best bosses I ever had were the best assistants. And so I helped everybody else achieve their goals, knowing that if I do that, then we'll all achieve a communal goal. I've always had that communal aspect, even, back into my acting days. And maybe that's part of it too. You learn about that as you study acting, and you learn all about the collaborative part of it. You also learn how to ad-lib, which is really important for all of us in the business. Now, as far as fundraising is concerned, I have great admiration for people who fundraise for the arts. I've only had experience with those who fundraise for the arts. I also know that if you don't have, you have to have passion and tenacity and a lot of other things to be successful in fundraising for the arts. And over the years, it struck me finally why. It's different. And the reason it's different is because only in the arts, in the nonprofit arts world, have we created a system whereby the donor is also the beneficiary. Donors donate so that donors may attend. And it's the only place where that exists. You might make a case that it exists in, college applications and things that a parent might donate so their kid gets into college. Sometimes that works out. Sometimes you're Felicity Huffman. Or Aunt, what was her name? Aunt something. from
Yeah. Yeah, they do it in the healthcare, right? So if you want a widget and your hospital doesn't have that widget, sometimes donors will provide
Right.
it so that they have that widget.
And then it becomes the John Q. Gottschalk's memorial widget.
Yes.
So it's a lot of toxicity going on, but it's especially toxic in the arts because there is no other. There are other ways of doing it. In fact, there are more legitimate ways of doing it, but the arts are a little different, among other things. And I'm always shocked when people tell me they haven't read Section 501c3 of the IRS code, because it's not long, it's not complicated, it's actually pretty, like 4 sentences, and it's pretty forthright about what is a tax-exempt activity, and the arts are never mentioned. That it's the difference between teaching and educating. A teacher's job in many places is to recite the curriculum. A teacher could recite the entire curriculum of the school year on day one and say they taught the whole class. And if the class didn't learn anything, that's on them. An educator doesn't succeed until the class has proven that they've learned something from the curriculum. Arts organizations are like teachers. They present, they say, look, this is good, you're going to talk about this, or it's entertaining, it's engaging. And that's all well and good. You can do that if you're a for-profit company. But once you decide to take all of your community's tax money, which is what you're doing when you're a nonprofit, you're not paying taxes, but somebody is, and it's your community, it's your state, technically, in the United States. And it's everybody is then the owner of your company. So if everybody's the owner of your company and you're not serving even the least among us in a charitable way, you're actually failing as an organization. Even if you're succeeding in presenting art that's of, I don't even want to call it excellent quality, because excellence is a completely subjective term. My excellence could be your goat crap.
Right.
Bupkis, we call that. But if you do something that actually makes the community a better place to live, you can make a much more reasonable argument that you are, in fact, doing charitable work. And nonprofits and charities, I used to think there was a difference. The only difference is that you use the word nonprofit when you talk about it in tax parlance, and you use the word charity when you're talking about it in social aspect, but it's all the same. It's a charity, and you have to do charitable activities. The more artists you have in your community, Richard Florida wrote about this and many others, the more successful your community is. Arts funding has dropped considerably over the year. Financially speaking, arts funding has dropped every year for the last 15 years now. It dropped a lot during the it dropped a lot during the pandemic. There was government support during that was available for everybody. And then they added things like the shuttered venues program and stuff like that. But now that's over. Arts organizations are closing, and they're closing
Right.
left and right because they refuse to become the charities that their community wants. If I learned nothing else from audience research back even in the TKTS days, you can't make somebody go to something they don't want to see. The biggest metric that you could look up for your own organization, if you take a job as a development director for an organization, is to look at the last 5 years worth of donations and find out how many of those households, just count households, that are not on the board, did not give at the annual gala or gala, depending on how fancy you are not parents or, related to people who are in the organization. And tell me how many households gave more than $50. And what you'll find is that it's a really small amount. If it's not a small amount, that means you actually are serving the community and people are noticing, and there must be something about your company that's different. But in the main, what you're going to find out is, I found this out at Arts West when I started there. It was a $500,000 company. There were 12 households that gave $50 or more who weren't related to anybody or who weren't employees or ex-employees. That was it, 12 households.
Alan, thank you so much for joining me. If folks wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing
the book.
that?
I don't know if it's backwards or forwards or whatever, but there it is.
No, it's the right way.
Scene Change. It's available everywhere you buy books. I always say if you happen to have an independent bookstore that you prefer, then go buy it there. But if you have to go to, the Amazon folks or Barnes & Noble or whomever, go do that too. I hope you do get the book. It is Why Today's Nonprofit Arts Organizations Have to Stop Producing Art and Start Producing Impact. Once they start producing impact, your job as a fundraiser, as a development person, becomes tons easier. So you need to insist that every board member reads this book and gets a hold of it. There's a second book, Scene Change 2, which is due out in January of 2025. So depending on when this is aired, it's either out or about to be out, and it's available in pre-order if it's not to be out yet. And that one specifically is for board members, the 5 real responsibilities of a nonprofit board. If you want to get a hold of me, my email address is 501c3.guru. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere on LinkedIn. I have a blog that appears weekly in artsjournal.com. I'm one of their AJ bloggers. I'm kind of everywhere. I even have a site on Medium. If you happen to see that, it's called Scene Change. Just type in Scene Change, Alan Harrison. You'll find me, even if you spell Alan wrong, and it's ALAN. That's it. That's how you find me. Come and do find me. Contact me. Don't just say, oh, he's busy or whatever. I am busy. I'm not too busy to talk to anybody who's interested in it, even if they disagree.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Hi, folks. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here.